Anakin Skywalker was a legend in his time, hailed all over the Republic as a hero of the Clone Wars, the hero with no fear, no less. His speciality was making all sorts of BS maneuvers work flawlessly, much to the consternation of his contemporaries and subordinates. Skywalker pulled Republic forces back from the brink of defeat time and time again, employing a combination of tactical acumen and sheer jaw-dropping luck. But what was the cause of his success? How did he get away with all the BS? In this video, we'll be answering that question.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Jedi General Anakin Skywalker commanded the 501st Legion, one of the most elite units in the Grand Army of the Republic. He and the 501st were known for their unconventional approach to combat, often making a mockery of procedure and winning battles because of it. Skywalker was known for being bold, unorthodox, and more than a little crazy. In battle, the risks he took were often so extreme that the HoloNet called him the hero with no fear. To the galaxy, it seemed as if there was nothing Skywalker couldn't do and nothing he was afraid of, and they attributed his successes in combat to this. Anakin's nickname was a bit misleading, however. The HoloNet was right in observing that he never feared for himself and was willing to throw himself into harm's way time and time again. But they were wrong in assuming that he had no fear at all. Anakin's heart was full of fear. Fear for the lives of the people he cared about. He was terrified for Obi-Wan, for Palpatine, for Padme, for Rex, and that was the true motivating factor behind his seeming recklessness. He did whatever he had to do to keep the beings he cared about alive. Skywalker's fear was an excellent motivator in battle. He was quite close with many of the men of the 501st, and his fear for their lives led him to keep them out of harm's way as much as possible. He loved Obi-Wan like a brother and would never sacrifice him or his men for the sake of victory. He loved Padme and Palpatine and believed that if the Republic lost the Clone Wars, their lives would be in danger. All of this motivated him to fight and win, and when Anakin had his heart set on victory, nothing could stop him. There's no passing apart Anakin's tactics in the usual sense. He followed a few clear patterns and didn't favor any one strategy over another, and that, in large part, was what made him so effective. He was always unpredictable, always a wild card, and he could always surprise his enemies with some crazy out of the left field maneuver. He was willing to try anything, and he was usually much more imaginative than his droid opponents, to their disadvantage. His tactics were beautifully, devastatingly insane. When you think of a crazy general, you might imagine them to be exceptionally callous. This is especially true in the case of the man who would go on to become Darth Vader. Anakin Skywalker has a reputation in the fanbase for committing war crimes, and not without reason, for he made a mockery of the laws of the war just as much as the orders of the Jedi Council. You would think that this would suggest that Anakin was a cold and callous commander, but he wasn't. In fact, he was one of the least callous Jedi generals in the entire Grand Army of the Republic. Consider the Battle of Pre Sitlan, the battle that won Anakin the rank of Jedi Knight. On Pre Sitlan, Anakin's forces were badly outnumbered. He had about 50,000 men and had to take a fortress guarded by well over 1 million battle droids. His attempt to storm the fortress, a conventional assault, was a disaster that killed many of Skywalker's men. He was unwilling to incur such high casualties a second time, but also unwilling to abandon Pre Sitlan, so he did what he did best. He took matters into his own hands. He gathered a squad of ARC troopers and stormed the fortress himself, single-handedly dismantling every droid between him and the command center. While the ARC troopers mopped up in his wake, he captured the enemy commander, shut the droid army down, and won the day. Another example of Skywalker's unwillingness to sacrifice lives was, ironically, Skywalker's most famous war crime. During the Battle of Ryloth, upon calculating that a second direct assault against the Separatist blockade would incur heavy casualties, Skywalker again took matters into his own hands. He evacuated one of his Star Destroyers, took sole command of it, and used it to ram the blockade's flagship, destroying both vessels. Skywalker managed to escape before the destruction of his ship, but he was still willing to sacrifice himself for victory above Ryloth, and conversely unwilling to sacrifice anyone else. As a final example, let's consider the Battle of Bothawoy. At Bothawoy, Skywalker had to protect the Bothawoy system against General Grievous's fleet of 6 with just 3 Venator-class Star Destroyers. These Star Destroyers were actually capable of taking out Grievous's 6 Munificent class Star frigates, but Skywalker again refused to play by the book as it would incur too many casualties. Instead, he stationed AT-TEs on the rings of Bothawui Prime and had them fire on the warship's exposed rear, allowing him to fly in solo and finish off the wounded ships. This won him the battle with minimal casualties, though it nearly cost him his life. Other Jedi wouldn't have gone to such lengths to conserve the lives under their command. They were willing to sacrifice men for the greater good. That was the Jedi way, after all. But Anakin Skywalker wasn't like other Jedi. To some, it might seem a bit paradoxical that other Jedi were more callous commanders than Anakin Skywalker. After all, Skywalker later fell to the dark side. How could he have changed so drastically when he became Darth Vader? To explain this seeming contradiction, some fans suggest that Skywalker and Vader were separate personalities, but this wasn't the case. Skywalker was always Vader, and Vader was always Skywalker. There were no lines between the two. In truth, what seems on first pass to be a contradiction actually isn't at all. Vader was not a divergence from Skywalker's deep attachment to the people he cared about, but rather the inevitable product of it. Consider the following passage from the Revenge of the Sith novelization. He sits in a blood-splattered, blaster-chopped chair behind a console he's never seen before. A console designed for alien fingers. The ship he's in is not only bucking like a maddened dewback through brutal coils of clear air turbulence, it's on fire and breaking up like a comet ripping apart as it crashes into a gas giant. He has only seconds to learn how to maneuver an alien craft that not only has no aft control cells, but no aft at all. This, put simply, is impossible. It can't be done. He's gonna do it anyway, because he's Anakin Skywalker and he doesn't believe in impossible. It's the Force that makes this possible, and more than the Force. Anakin has no interest in serene acceptance of what the Force will bring. Not here, not now, not with the lives of Palpatine and Obi-Wan at stake. It's just the opposite. He seizes upon the Force with the stark refusal to fail. He will land this ship. He will save his friends. Between his will and the will of the Force, there's no contest. If you're especially observant, you probably picked up in that last sentence what's going on here. In this sequence, which details Anakin's successful crash landing of the Invisible Hand during the Battle of Coruscant, Anakin was drawing on the dark side of the Force. That was the nature of the dark side after all, and what made it so hard to avoid. It was putting one's own will over the will of the Force, one's own will over the greater good of the universe. Anakin had good intentions, but as we know, the road to hell is paved with those. Anakin Skywalker didn't care about everyone, just those he was attached to. He was perfectly willing to do terrible things to his enemies, especially if he thought his loved ones were in danger. His transition to Vader wasn't a change in attitude, but rather a narrowing of the pool of people he cared about. Palpatine manipulated him so that Obi-Wan, the other Jedi, and even Padme became his enemies, and when Anakin realized this, he stopped caring about Palpatine as well. By the time he donned that suit, he had no one left to care about and enemies all around him. The cruelty he had always shown to his enemies came to the surface and his compassion vanished. Not because of a change in values, but because he had no one left to be compassionate toward. That is, he had no one left until his son came along, and then his compassion resurfaced. But what do you think? Have you thought about Anakin this way before? Would you be interested in a longer video about Anakin's character type? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.